U.S. and Iran are trading more strikes after President Trump said the ceasefire is over. This is the second consecutive night of attacks. U.S. Central Command says it hit about 90 targets inside Iran, including missile storage sites and air defense systems. In retaliation, Tehran says it targeted U.S. bases in Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar. Despite all of this, President Trump insists that Iran wants to talk.
They have very little left, and they want to make a deal so badly. They called a little while ago. They want to make a deal so badly. I just don't know if they're worthy of making a deal. I don't know that they're going to honor the deal.
CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi joins us now. Olivia, it feels like we're in a loop like on Groundhog Day. I mean, is a deal really still on the table? He says that the Iranians have called him and that they want to make a deal. But we've been hearing that kind of language since, the first week of the war. Right now, could we potentially see hostilities escalate even further?
Well, it seems like they could escalate further. The president has said basically that the ceasefire is dead. He doesn't consider the MOU still intact at this point. And Vice President Vance has also talked about, this really coming down to the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranians have said they have control of it, and they are continuing to shoot at ships that are trying to transit through the strait without getting approval first from the Iranians. That's really what sparked all of this and what had the U.S. returning to those strikes. Take a listen to what Vice President Vance said about this yesterday. And just a reminder that he is one of the key negotiators in all of this, at least from the U.S. side, in trying to get that deal somewhat moved forward.
They said they would stop shooting at ships. And what happened 24 hours ago? They started shooting at ships again. Now, they were good. They were well behaved for about a week, but then they started shooting at ships. So the deal is very simple. If they shoot at ships, we're going to knock the hell out of them, and it's that simple, and that's the basic way it's going to work.
Now, on the prospect of a deal, we just don't know where the negotiations are at this point. We don't know when the next round is going to be, whether it be with Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, or even the vice president himself going to have those negotiations. And if you'll remember, the last round of negotiations, they weren't even direct talks. They were indirect talks between the U.S. and Qatar and the Iranians and Pakistanis. So they're not even at a point yet where they're talking face-to-face about how to end this war. Despite all of that, still within Iran, there is a fracture in the Iranian leadership. Some are calling to make a deal. Some are willing to move forward with these strikes and perpetuating war in the region. So all of this is creating a very fractured environment that the U.S. is trying to work in to get somewhat of a deal moving forward. But still, President Trump seems to be signaling that the U.S. may go back to some type of war with Iran. Full strikes may continue if this situation in the Strait of Hormuz continues.
Olivia, while we have you, I thought this was curious. On the way home from the NATO summit, President Trump flew out of Turkey on the old Air Force One instead of the new Qatari gifted plane. Any sense why?
Yeah, that caught our attention as well that he did that, given the fact that he did fly over there in the first inaugural international trip with that new Qatari jet, which American taxpayers paid about $400 million for. Yet when leaving, he flew on that old iconic Kennedy blue Air Force One. They met up with the new jet when they stopped to refuel in the United Kingdom. President Trump said on Truth Social that the reason why they sent the Qatari jet ahead, the new Air Force One ahead of the one he flew on, was because some service members at that base in the UK had requested to see it. So that's why he says it went ahead. However, there are several reports this morning that the U.S. Secret Service actually had asked for the president to fly on the original Air Force One, that old Kennedy blue Air Force One, because of those renewed strikes in Iran. Now, just a reminder, Turkey, which President Trump was departing from, is a neighbor of Iran. So given the threat environment, they had allegedly asked the president to fly back home on the old plane. We did just get a statement from the White House communications director who said that the new Air Force One is a state-of-the-art aircraft that has been fitted with the highest level of security protocols to ensure the safety of the president and his staff. But he goes on to say, as the president has said recently, there are many enemies of America who have their sights on him, and we use every tool at our disposal, including distraction and misdirection, to address those threats. That is from Stephen Chung, who is the White House communications director. So perhaps there was some sort of misdirection that they were trying to use in having the president be on the old Air Force One.
Yeah, except that it seems sort of not common. And I note that former CIA Director Leon Panetta on another network indicated that there was, in his estimation and his experience, perhaps something specifically related to that aircraft as it came from a foreign power, certainly an ally of the United States, but still a foreign power, whereas the original Air Force One, the one that he ultimately flew on, was built in the United States, specifically for the President of the United States. I wonder if the White House has addressed some of those concerns that people in the intel community might have.
Well, the White House really pointed us back to an old statement that they had about the new Air Force One that they released about a month ago, that said that the aircraft is safe and secure and equipped with some advanced technologies necessary to meet the requirements when the president does fly on it, because of course you don't have him fly on it unless it is ultimately safe. That is part of the reason why the Secret Service made that decision, it seems like, when it comes to this case. But in reality, we're working on learning more, about why this decision ultimately was made, why it would be safe for the president to fly on Air Force One from the UK to the US, but it wasn't necessarily the safest thing if it's true that the U.S. Secret Service made this decision for him to fly from Turkey to the UK on that plane.
Very curious. All right, Olivia, as always, we thank you.
I want to bring in CBS News contributor Courtney Kealy. Appreciate you joining us. So the president, when he was talking about Iran in his NATO summit remarks, was very strong in how he talked about Iran. What do you make of this stance in terms of a negotiation? Is this one step forward, two steps back?
I think that there are real issues with the memo of understanding. There are also real issues with me repeating what President Trump said on camera, because the mildest word is that he said the Iranians were cuckoo and will leave the rest, to tape. So with the memo of understanding, there was an issue about maritime channels. And Iran interpreted it as that the tankers would go through the Iranian corridor, not the Omani corridor. That's what's escalated these recent airstrikes and these attacks. But secondly, there's southern Lebanon that was supposed to have a ceasefire, and that's ongoing, and Israel's still there with no sight of that ending. That's a key part to it. So some analysts call it the memo of misunderstanding. So that's a big problem, and it's interpreted differently. President Trump is very transparent. He wants a deal. But this is complex stuff, and the Iranians are having a fracture in their leadership, which belies this whole procession of the funeral that we've seen, this week-long outpouring of mourning.
All right, so is this going on as this is all happening as the Iranian people are burying their former supreme leader? It's interesting to me that the images that are coming out of Tehran show massive support for the regime, whereas I recall the Trump administration signaling to us, the American people, that once this war kicked off, that Iranians would be in the streets to welcome the United States and to welcome an attempt at regime change. But we haven't seen that.
Right, not everybody. We're seeing the mourners. We're seeing the most devout, the people, the 15 to 30% of people that are devoted to this Islamic Republic and this revolution. And it's also playing out in holy sites that represent martyrdom, that represent yesterday in Iraq. It's not just political, showing that they still have a huge imprint in Iraq since the U.S. invaded, but it's also tying this martyrdom of the original martyrdom of Hussein and at that shrine to the martyrdom of Khomeini. But there are reports that, and there's some video, not really that great video online, that shows that President Pezeshkian, he was manhandled in the crowd by people opposing him, and that also Iraq was thrown at the foreign minister. So this happened on Monday. There are hardliners that just don't want a deal. There's the Iranian Revolutionary Guard that is now really clearly in charge. So once these religious processionals end, they're covering up. It's like a mask of what actual Iranians think, and the majority, and the people that have suffered the massacres, and the people that are on death row, and the people that are still in jail unlawfully. That all exists. The human rights groups are saying it all exists, but the visuals of this look like a unity, a whole country in unity. That's not true. It's just not true at all. But this shows that the people who are devout are incredibly, incredibly devoted.
All right, Courtney, Kealy, really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, Courtney.